So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for this special webinar event with Yellow Day and our expert trainer, Tom Cleary. So as you will have heard, this session is being recorded for sharing, but I will switch off the recording before Q&A at the end. It's great to see some familiar and new faces today. For all of those that are new, a little bit about us. So myself and my colleague Alex are here today from Yellow Day. And Yellow Day provide high quality training, consultancy and coaching services to our clients in all sectors. Basically, if you've got people who need developing, we can help. So we're really proud to work with a team of extraordinary facilitators who build workshops and courses bespoke to our clients' needs and the context behind the training. We also have a range of online open courses for individuals to join from any organisation. Our development opportunities consistently receive really excellent feedback, and we're really lucky to have industry and topic experts as part of our team who bring their own professional experience and excellent facilitation skills together to provide great learning opportunities. So today I'm really pleased to introduce you to Tom Cleary, who we've worked with for many years now, providing mental health, first aid and wellbeing training for our clients. He has extensive experience in the learning and development space and delivers meaningful, applicable learning opportunities for individuals and teams. Tom's recently collaborated with us in putting together some more new courses, including working well with groups and other wellbeing and facilitation topics, which I'll send you more details about after the session today. Hopefully this morning will be the perfect opportunity for you to get to know Tom, sample his training style and learn something new. We'll also have some time for questions throughout the session and at the end of the session, so please do get involved in the conversation. Thanks again, everyone, and over to you, Tom.
Thanks, Emily. Very coherent introduction for a Friday morning. So I'm conscious that for many of us, our brains might not be working as fluidly as they might do other points of the day. So thank you all for being here and joining us today. My name is Tom. I will be hopefully supporting you for this next hour. Please do pop in the chat box a little bit about you if you can, do what your role is, what's brought you here today. It's useful because I can tweak things and change things as we go through today and hopefully make it as useful as possible to all of you. I'll do a mixture of sharing slides and not, so that we can sort of see things in different ways. But yeah, so we're working on working well together today, and a lot of the work I do is on this kind of topic. It's thinking about groups and thinking about how we can do things like run meetings well, run workshops well, things along those lines. I'll do a proper intro in a second, but I like to start off with making sure that the group space feels safe to people. So a few things about how we can work well together in the group today. Please take part in whatever way feels most comfortable for you. As I say, it's Friday morning. If your brain's a little bit spent today and you want to be off camera, off mic, and just sitting back and listening, totally get that. Often do the same thing on a Friday morning if I get a chance to. Absolutely fine. If you want to be more interactive, please do ask questions as we go through. I'll look at the chat box as we go through the session. I'll try and answer things as well as we get to it all the way through. Hopefully we can have a respectful, supportive environment. We're all learning with this, and I would say that anyone in this space who says they finished learning, there's an issue there, because I will learn new things from a brand new trainer or facilitator who has just qualified, all the way through someone who's been doing it for 50 years. So we're always learning something new as we go through. Use the chat box as we come through to things. You can ask things in private chat if you want to, in the group chat. Because of time, we might move some topics on a bit more quickly than we might want to. But I've also said to Emily this morning, if we've got a more chatty group, lots of questions, I might actually just skip a few slides. Anything we skip today, I'll put into a mini video and send out to you later on, because that benefit of having that group together and being able to discuss things and unpick things can be really, really useful. But also, if we've got a group who are very quiet, there's enough content to make it last the hour easily. So either way is absolutely fine. This can be a bit meta, because I don't mean the Facebook thing. I'm talking about in terms of stepping back away from things and going, we're talking about running groups while running a group. So please do feel free to ask me in the chat box, why did you choose to do that? Or how does that work? Or why does that technique get chosen? Because if you want to ask things about why we're doing things a certain way today, please feel free to. And this is a big topic. We're talking about meetings, team sessions, workshops, training. So We're not going to cover that in an hour, but hopefully there's some useful little bits in here as a taste of what we can do throughout it. I'm conscious the text, the chat box is working really well. So thank you all for doing that, coming through. Some really interesting, a range of different roles and things coming through in here. The word facilitate is coming through. So that idea about running groups and helping things become easier, that sort of process. I love that some people, it's so common that people end up doing a lot of group work without choosing to do that. We kind of fall into this role quite a lot. So thank you, those of you who are sharing that in the chat box. A bit about me while you're doing your intros in the chat box there. So it's a really weird job and role for me. I am somebody who went from being quite clinically shy, as in I got diagnosed with social anxiety, couldn't talk to people at all, even one to one. When I was at university the first time, if there was a presentation at all, I would change module. And the one time I had to do it, I was on Valium and beta blockers from my GP, and I still failed it miserably. So I was absolutely useless at anything like this at all, and certainly not even with groups. And now my job involves 16 years now working with groups and developing people who do. I do keynote talks to hundreds of people. I work with groups and strangers every single day, most weeks as well, including around the world. I mentor student teachers. I coach experienced teachers. I have now mentored hundreds of people to do this sort of thing. And I run a business and podcast which does this as well. So it's a really odd transition from somebody who wouldn't even talk to a single person to talking to groups all the time. So wherever you are on that spectrum of I don't like talking to people working with groups to I really love it, I've been somewhere along those lines the whole way through. So hopefully there's something in there as to why I'm running this session today. We're talking about a few different things today about developing confidence in doing this, thinking about how to include other people, especially in challenging topics, and then a few practical steps that we can hopefully apply from, well, either this afternoon or on Monday, whatever you're going to be doing the next group session together. And what I'd love to know from the group is which of these three areas is most useful to you? Is it about developing confidence? You might be new to working with groups and wanting to get a bit of a boost, or you've worked with groups for a few years and actually don't enjoy it that much. Is it you run a lot of challenging situations and topics and you don't know how to get people to engage in that space with you? What sort of thing are you hoping to get out of today while I'm sort of reading through some of your intros? So anything you want to chat in the chat box, please feel free to do so. It is a really lovely mixture. So please have a look through other people's messages to see the range of people we've got in the room here. From HR, we've got payroll, applicant engagement, team responsibilities, admin and psychology, leading meetings, humanities. Actually, and what you can get out of a group like this, it's a really lovely mixed group, is people's thoughts and their input in terms of how they approach similar themes, because you all have different experiences in doing things like this. Thank you all for that. So new approaches to leading meetings is coming through in here. Yeah, absolutely fine. I'm going to move on, but if you want to put anything in the chat, please feel free to. And I always say to people, this isn't a typing competition. If you are midway through typing a long sentence and I've moved on, please still send it in, because I can pause, we can move back if we need to. It's absolutely fine to do that. Thank you to Caroline there. So that participation bit in meetings, we can definitely have a look at that today. Anything we don't cover, I will do a mini video and cover those last bits out there as well, so you won't miss anything out. Same thing. If I get any names wrong, by the way, please do correct me. I have my family have a lot of dyslexia in it, and it appears for me with names. Even my own partner gets misnamed at least once every sort of 2 weeks or so. So it's not personal at all. I will do my best. So thank you to Dilks there for that part there. So it looks like the participation bit is really important here. Oh, gaining confidence from Matt here too. Oh, we've got a whole range. Okay, we'll do it all. It's fine. We'll do all the different bits in the session today as much as we can do, but hopefully we can get quite a lot of those covered off. Okay, in that case, what do you think makes a session actually work? And by session, I mean, a team meeting, a workshop. It can be anything at all where you are leading a group of some kind. What is it that makes a session work really well? In the chat box, what are you thinking about that? What's making a session work really well? Love that from Zoe there. Quick typing too. Everyone feeling safe and comfortable to engage. Brilliant. And it sounds really simple. It's such a hard thing to do sometimes, especially when the topic is a challenging one, which I do a lot of. So when people are collaborating, I can't speak, say collaborating? No, collaborating and engaging. When everyone feels they're getting something out of the session, brilliant. And that's really close to what one of the key answers comes from this, actually. Brilliant from Matt there, allowing everyone to feel heard and allow a group decision to take place. Brilliant. So I'm imagining you've got a lot of very experienced people in the room today. So that's really interesting to hear. It's great to see. When we talk to people, because one of my roles is we actually ask the people who take part in groups, did you get something out of that? What made you feel it was successful or not? It doesn't always match up with what we think of when we are the one who is leading that group. And the bit that it comes back to is a quote that it's often attributed to Maya Angelou because she was using this in interviews, actually came from an author quite a long time before that. This idea that people forget what was said and what we did, but they remember how we made them feel. And in any kind of group situation, there's going to be an outcome to that. And that might be an outcome from the meeting. It might be we need to make a group decision about something. It might be you're doing some mentoring or developing or some training. And we tend to focus on the outcome bits. We forget sometimes to focus on how we make the group feel. And a lot of work that I do with people when we're looking at refining group skills is, are we paying attention to how we make people feel in that room as well? I would guess from the comments in the chat box that you are doing that because you talked about exact things that do that, where people are collaborating. I said it again, collaborating. It seems to be stuck in my head now. People are collaborating and feeling like they are taking part in that. They're being respected. They're being helped to engage and feel safe in that. But this is a really, really big part of it. So it's good to see people are thinking along those lines already with that. The other thing that we get from this, and people talk about one of the biggest things that help groups to work, is the level of confidence that somebody has when leading a group. And if somebody comes on who is super quiet and super shy, face will slump down, and their body language is kind of showing that they don't necessarily have that authority in the room, we have an issue. So confidence is normally the biggest thing people rate people on when it comes to this kind of thing. This is quite a vulnerable, kind of open question to ask people. You don't have to respond to it. But if I said from 1 to 5, 1 being I feel really lacking confidence when working with groups, and 5 being, yep, I feel completely on it, really enjoy working with groups, what would you scale yourself as in the chat box? So 1 to 5, 1 being, do you know what? Groups genuinely scare me sometimes. 3 to 5, love it, bring it on, fantastic. Or somewhere in between those. From 1 to 5, how are people feeling here? So a real mixture, but we've got, I would say, middle to high. We've got a couple of 2s coming in, so slightly lower down there, a few 5s, but we've got a kind of bunch of people right around that kind of middle part with 3s and 4s coming on here as well. Okay. I'm interested about what might change that for you. So, for example, for some people, if they know that they have got a session coming up and they get to plan for it, that makes them feel more confident. For other people, actually makes them worse because they start to worry about that, overthink it, overplan it. Are there certain things? So Lydia's already on there with this. So it depends on the people. So I love the honesty here. Thank you, Lydia. So often about 2, but pretending it's a 4 or a 5. And you got a heart reaction straight away from that because we tend not to be that open about it. So I really love the idea that you're saying, this is how I genuinely feel. And this is the bit about how I'm presenting myself because we know the confidence is really important with that sort of thing. Ahmed, yeah, it depends on how people are feeling and sometimes how we are feeling as well as being that group lead. We do not come into groups with a completely blank slate. The fact that this morning my computer on the side here has broken, my timing sheet fell off as I opened the call with Emily this morning. It's one of those days, and we bring that sort of thing into the room. So what's happening with us, how we feel as well, and how the group we're working with are feeling, will all change how we feel about that sort of thing. Are there certain things that we haven't mentioned so far that change it for you? So we've mentioned the people in the room, how they are feeling, how we are feeling. I've mentioned prep time. For some people, it's a case of I prefer almost doing it unexpectedly, so I haven't got that time to be anxious and overthink it. For other people, they like to have it lots of time to prepare and think about things. Ah, Emily, yeah, how many people there are. And weirdly, this can work in both ways. So for some people, we tend to assume that larger groups are scarier. But for a lot of people, once we get past a certain number, the group tends not to be as scary because they start becoming almost individuals. I equate it to doing, I have a fear of heights and I'm very stubborn. So I made myself on my, I think, 18th birthday a long time ago do a skydive. And I remember getting really high up and looking down and going, I don't feel as scared as I would do on top of a ladder because it looks unreal. It's so high up and it's so kind of minuscule down there. And sometimes the larger numbers can feel that way, whereas a group of 4 or 5 people, where they're all looking at us and we've got direct kind of focus on us, can be very, very different there. Um, but flip side of that, we've got Kirsty, so bigger groups and people I don't know very well to cause anxiety. So a lot of the time I work with people and we talk about that kind of social judgment we get from people working within the groups. So Liz, how well you know the attendees, better you know them, the scarier it is. Yes, I can agree with that as well. Um, and the subject, yeah, how well we know this, and then feel comfortable with people participating in that as well. So all of these different elements can come into doing this. So thank you everyone for sharing that sort of thing. Oh, and virtual and in person as well. Yeah, absolutely to those ones. I have had a group of 2 people online before, which is an odd one there for I think it was a half-day session. So it's an interesting one to see how we get that kind of mix going on. Let's move on a little bit with this bit here. Now, this feels like a very wordy kind of quote. The quality of intervention depends on the clarity of interpretation. Basically, how well we do things, because all of the work we are doing with groups is when and how we intervene, or maybe when we don't on purpose, is based on how well we are interpreting what's happening in that room. And if we build on this a little bit, we're thinking about every moment in rooms. I put difficult in brackets there because often we're thinking about those challenging moments in rooms, but every moment in a room can be understood through 3 key moves. And what we're thinking about here is the seeing part of it. So, what I notice, because it's almost impossible to notice every single thing happening. So, what we end up noticing in that group, whether it's online or whether it is to do with being in person, that's going to make a difference. So, we see certain things or hear certain things or notice certain things, and then we interpret them. So, what am I making that moment mean? So, I saw that thing over there, or I read that comment in the chat box, and now I'm going to interpret that in a certain way. And once we've done that, we then respond, what I choose to do. What most of us do is not respond, we react because it happens so quickly with this. Saw that, think that, and this happens instead. And so we end up feeling slightly out of control with it. And so much of the work that I do with people is thinking about being more intentional about what we notice and being aware about how we interpret those things and then how we choose to respond to that moment. Any thoughts or questions on that from the group, please feel free to ask as we go through, either in chat, come off mute and just talk, whichever you prefer to do is absolutely fine. What's your thought process on this idea about how we respond in a room or a group situation? I shall sit in uncomfortable silence for a bit while you are thinking or typing. And if you don't want to, it's absolutely fine. Love that question from E. Doughty there. So, a way to change from react to respond about having more time, it's the awareness part of it. So, what happens is such a lot of the time, we're not even aware this is happening. We don't even become aware of what we notice and that we're having stories in our head. And a big part of actually doing this is to become aware of what stories sit in our heads with this sort of thing. And as a species, as human beings, we are exceptionally good at remembering all of those catastrophic failures that took place. So we have negative anchors. If I ask people in the group what went bad recently, they will throw things at me. If I say, can you give me one good thing that's happened lately? They're like, uh, yeah, maybe. This happens with this as well. So we end up collecting negative experiences. And then when something happens in the room which throws us or wobbles us as a kind of group leader, without realizing it, we'll link it back into a story that we've had probably for many years, actually. And then we have a set reaction to doing that. What I encourage people to do is after you've run a session, for maybe your next one, is sit back and go, were there moments in that room where actually something happened? I went into autopilot and started to do something. It's as simple as that. We start reflecting and taking, it can be 5 minutes after a group work session, after a meeting, after a workshop. We start realizing what are those autopilot things that we do? What are those stories that we tap into? And for a lot of people, once you become more aware of that, we start being able to intervene. There's some amazing work on this, which talks about being in the swamp of group work, where it feels really uncomfortable and we think we're doing things wrong, but how we learn the most from that. And the most real impact in team meetings and workshops comes from being slightly uncomfortable with it, but we tend to skip through it. So a lot of the time, what we're doing, if you go back that previous slide, we almost try to get out of discomfort by reacting really quickly to going, well, let's move past that. Let's speed past that a little bit. Let's not talk about that thing there. So sometimes also staying in discomfort, weirdly, works better for us and for the group. Any other questions? Let me know on that. It's a big topic. I want to put it in here because I think if we've got experienced people in the room who are doing it, this is often that sort of next level on about being aware of our own practice. I've worked with people recently who have run training teams for literally for decades, who themselves are really experienced trainers, group leaders, workshop leaders, meeting leaders. And then I asked them when they're training their own training teams, do you know how to answer when your team says to you, oh, I love that technique you're doing. Why do you choose to do that? And often they think, I don't know why, I just naturally do it. We very rarely step back out of our practice and go a little bit meta with this and think, well, why am I doing that? Where does it come from? So it's almost stepping back and breaking down the things that we do in order to build it up a bit more intentionally, if that makes sense. I've seen no more questions coming through on that, so I'll move on for the moment, but please feel free to ask things as we go through if you have any more on this. The next bit I wanted to mention today is this sort of idea about pressure and expectations. Again, in the chat box, how many people feel a lot of pressure to kind of do a really good job when they're running a meeting, running a workshop, running some training? And where does that pressure come from most of the time? I'd be curious about where that comes from, because I sent that questionnaire out recently to about, I think, 150 people who run kind of group sessions of various kinds. And the word pressure and expectation came up in probably about 75% of the people answering those questions. It was significant in there. So curious about this group here. What are your thoughts about kind of pressure and expectations when it comes to running groups? They tend to be quite high. Any thoughts on that? Again, if you don't want to answer, not a problem at all. Yeah, Ahmed, thank you. Sometimes pressure comes from lack of engagement from attendees. It can do. And again, that goes back to that kind of three-step thing there. We're noticing the lack of engagement. We're interpreting it as a certain thing. Maybe either what I'm doing isn't landing or I don't want to be here. There's a story behind that. And then how we choose to respond to that will then change what happens in that group later on. Absolutely. A lot of people, when I analyze this, I've worked with people recently where we've done sort of 6 sessions together and really unpicked their practice. And you talk about those internal expectations, which Zoe, you've got there before. I've been sentence, that's fantastic. Exactly that. The pressure on ourselves. And this comes so, so strongly. Normally, the person with the biggest expectation when we're going into a workshop, a meeting, a team situation is us. I have to do a really good job. I have to be perfect at doing this. I have run group sessions for years and years and years. And I still do this. I still have that pressure to can't make a mistake, can't do that. We will do. We're all learning, we're all doing things. We have to take that pressure off ourselves from doing that. Um, yeah, and that change from one of a team, as Lydia says, to being a leader or supervisor, the team dynamics can shift in that part as well. Everyone feeling heard becomes a pressure there as well. And as Kirsty is saying, if you're not naturally confident in something, then that pressure coming from there as well. There is something I want to mention on this, and it's something where a lot of people who do impose a lot of sort of self-pressure on this find it quite useful. Um, when we try to be perfect, it lands really badly with a group, and people pick up on that. And we almost become a robotic version of ourselves, and people will constantly say, I liked somebody because they were very human. They were very themselves in that. And if you are anxious about working with a group, sometimes voicing that genuinely can work really well, but only on one condition. This can go in one of two ways. If you are somebody who has set up your authority with a group, at that point, if people go, oh, this is why I should listen to that person, being open about why you are, being a bit anxious about it. So, for example, or this is a brand new group I'm working with, or it's a new topic, or I don't normally work online, whatever it might be, voicing that with the authority established works really well. However, if you go into a group and just say, oh, I'm really nervous, like I can't do this, and they don't know why they should listen to you in the first place, it can fall apart. And we tend to forget about making sure the authority is there, first of all. It's why one of my first slides is I've been doing this for a very long time. I've trained, it's now thousands of people in doing this. Because even if I, no, not if I, when I make a mistake as we go through, like saying the wrong word multiple times, it's not as big an issue as if I came in here and you had no idea who I was and there was no authority there in the topic. It's really important. So there's a balancing act here about being human and being able to be able to make mistakes with things and not have those expectations. But there is that caveat of you need the group to have bought into who you are, first of all. Any thoughts on that, please let me know as we kind of go through this. From E Doughty there, we will come into that in a second because that's really important. We talked about in that bit there about sensitive topics. Yeah, but new and positive comments and content coming through, listening to the loud people. There are techniques we can do to kind of bypass that, Kath. Absolutely. So we've got a lot of, I call squeaky wheel stuff going on here. So we've got things where if someone's making a lot of noise or they've got a lot of attention on them, how much we focus on that person. It goes back to those 3 steps. I'm noticing that person talking a lot, and then I'm going to end up automatically going through the cycle and focusing on that person a huge amount of the time. So actually, a lot of these are going to come into that next section we're going to move on to in a minute. But hopefully a little bit of permission here in terms of being kind to yourself and not having to be as performative. But it is important because some people do that and go, why did it go really, really wrong? And normally it's because there hasn't been the authority married up to the idea about being able to be kind of human and be vulnerable with that as well. Let's move on. But any questions again, please feel free to fire them at me as we go through. But you are allowed to be human and you're allowed to make mistakes as we go through things. This has been mentioned already a little bit in the chat box here. So people talking about sensitive topics in that. And so thinking about helping people to take part when we have things like this. First of all, what kind of situations do you currently work with where you do find it challenging, where people are not participating? I'll put a few examples on the screen, and there are hundreds of these, but to give you a bit of a kind of idea about the sort of things that happen with this, they tend to fall into 3 categories. They tend to fall into either there is a topic itself which is really difficult. It might be there is a situation which lends itself to low engagement, or it might be there is a situation within a group session which itself means that we have suddenly uncomfortable silence. Are there any situations that the group we've got with us today experience where you think, do you know what, I find it really hard to either manage that situation or get people to take part and contribute in the way that I think we're trying to achieve here? Anything people want to share about the sort of situations that you end up in where you think, actually, I find this bit really hard to navigate? So you've mentioned sort of, loud people going on, people who maybe are complaining about things being there. Someone's mentioned sensitive topics. If you want to expand on what those look like as well, what kind of things are we talking about here? Because it can be ones, I run sessions, for example, on things like bereavement. And that, by its very nature, it's a sensitive topic. We do things like mental health. We do things like preventing really horrible things happening in the workplace. Those can be sensitive topics, but also things like restructuring and redundancies can be difficult. Change in organizations can be really difficult. So what sort of situations are people thinking about where, because at the very beginning I asked you what was useful to you, a lot of people said about helping people to participate. So what is stopping it? What is the situation that might be there? Thank you to Idauti there. So experience with low engagement groups and why I joined today. Anything you can add in about the kind of situations and the context there so I can help to skew what we're talking about next, and that'd be super helpful. But if you don't want to or don't feel comfortable to, please feel free not to as well. I'm going to move on and do it in a more generic way. But if anyone puts something in that's specific, I can answer that specific question hopefully as well as we go through. We do know that for a lot of people in this sort of situation, we've got these issues happening where we might freeze, that kind of three-step thing there. If there is lack of engagement, there is discomfort. If you have on that bottom group there, maybe you've asked a question and no one knows the answer to it, which happened to me at least 3 times so far this morning. Or maybe that second box there where you've asked a question and people know the answer, but for some reason they don't want to answer that question. Or especially in live sessions and in person even more so, there's been a disagreement, an argument, there's been tension in there going on. You're thinking, okay, I can feel the entire atmosphere has changed in the room now, and do I ignore that and just kind of continue going on? But this can happen. People can throw things into a group, and it can be something where almost like an unexploded bomb in there in terms of it's going to go off at some point. I don't know how to handle that. It can be throwing a spanner in the works where it doesn't immediately derail things, but at some point the entire thing falls apart. And I also use the imagery of someone throws something super weird into a room and we go, I don't even know how to respond. In fact, so I'm going to ignore it. I have an image of an elephant in a pink tutu. And I go, I do ignoring that and going, I don't even know how to respond to it, so I won't. But everyone's thinking it. Everyone's going, why is that thing happening? What's going on here? So it's that kind of thing we tend to see going on. Oh, so I love this one from Lydia here. So a meeting where the conversation goes on things that we as a group can't change or influence, and people need to air their thoughts, we can't move on. This is something I come across in probably 90% of sessions I run, Lydia. And if I think there's a chance of doing that, I will almost always show a model which is exactly about that. So I was running sessions for university for about 2 years on how staff can support student mental well-being. And we knew really early on that sessions would go into university policy as a whole, it would go into government funding, it would go into the state of the world as a whole, and all these massive topics that actually we weren't going to solve in a 3-hour session with that group. So the very first slide we had was, we want to acknowledge that there are really big elements out there that we can't control. But in order to get the most out of today's session, we're going to keep bringing you back onto, so what can we change? What can we influence in today? So you give validation to, we're not dismissing those things going on there. We know they're there. If you want to air them, we can have either in the chat box, or you can have a question car park. You can write down comments and put it on there. We're not going to use up too much air or time in the room today to do that. So really early on, we actually preempt that, and we can remind people of what we're doing. And it helps us to go, absolutely get that. The policy right now is challenging. Maybe in some point we can influence that, but today in this hour we've got together, we can't do that. So we're going to park that and move on. It gives you permission to do that sort of thing later on. So great point, Lydia, in that one. I would say to you a few things to bear in mind here is that when we get these hard moments in a session, we often interpret them, so back to that storytelling, that something has gone wrong. And that's often not the case at all. A hard moment often means something genuinely useful is happening. So something is being voiced, or we're unpicking something which, if we don't do it, can derail things later on. We often go into problem solving mode. We try to fix the issue and make everything feel calm and comfortable and happy again. Our role very often isn't to do that. Our role isn't to fix or resolve every problem out there in the world. It's often to hold that space so people can engage in a comfortable way. A technique which can work really well with this is genuinely naming that. It goes back to kind of being human. So actually saying to people, do you know what? This feels really challenging right now. Let's just stop here for a moment and explore why that's going on. So often we don't talk about that. We kind of just ignore that and hope the feeling will go away. So much research and also experience from people I'm working with for years now, naming things, bringing something up, which, like, you know what, I can feel this is a conflict, this is a challenge, there's something here that actually maybe we need to look at for a moment here. So naming things. And the idea is that also the more comfortable you make a learning environment, the more likely people are to actually go into those places, and it is useful later on. So it's a sign of success, weirdly, in many ways. And so much of this comes down to the idea of psychological safety. And those of you who might not be aware of it, maybe you might be Amy Edmondson, in Harvard, doing a lot of work on this sort of thing. This idea that, and we often get this mixed up, we're not talking about making every environment really comfortable and safe and really calm. We're talking about, are we allowing people to take a risk and make it worth taking? So being able to voice something which goes against the group dynamic, goes against the kind of group thinking process, a thought that people might feel uncomfortable with, but needs to be voiced in some way. Now, this topic is, easily, well, not just an hour, but multiple hours in its own right. It's like safety is an enormous element of anything that we're doing in terms of training, group work, meetings, workshops. But one thing I think is useful in terms of today is this idea that we are not going to create this through policies a lot of the time. We're doing this in step by step. Now, I love Lego. I wanted to bring it in some form into here today, but actually, we're doing this with psychological safety. We build up this in every interaction that we have. And we can do this in every bit of a meeting that we do by acknowledging people's points of view, helping people to feel heard, allowing people to voice things, and then to move on beyond that. So I wanted to kind of round off today by doing some practical techniques to allow group work to work, which also hopefully allow you as a group leader and your group to enhance that feeling of safety as we go through. Before I share a few things from my perspective, I'm interested in what the group think. Are there certain things that you do already with your groups, in whatever form that might take, which you think genuinely build that safety element that allow people to take part, to voice ideas, to disagree, to make things uncomfortable, but in a positive way? Anything here the group can share, because often your colleagues here who are joining from multiple different places might learn something from you because your context is different from theirs. So please feel free to share anything that you think might be useful to the group. I'll keep an eye on the chat box, and so things come through, I will voice them. But again, if not, if your brain's a little bit tired on a Friday, not a problem at all with that. But I want to make sure you've got a chance to voice things that you do already really well, because often it can be powerful to have people from the group who are sharing that kind of thing. It might be that you get a memory jog from the sort of things I'm going to share with you next as well. So these are some practical small steps that we can do moving forwards. I want to also point out the fact that small changes don't also mean small impacts. The number of times I see people spending huge amounts of time on things that have very limited impact. So, for example, it can feel really productive to polish a slide deck, PowerPoint, whatever you want to call it, for a really long time. But actually, that's not what tends to make the impact with people. And sometimes these really small things can make a massive impact. So, Kath, great one here. So using humor, and low status is really interesting. So balancing status and things like the strongest voice goes last. So if you've got somebody in a group environment, for example, who has got a very senior level, so often that person speaks first, and it will actually squash down a lot of what's happening with the group. We tend to try and reverse that. That person, the very last person to speak, the more weight their voice holds, the later on they speak. So little bits like that. Great point that you made across there. Um, Yep, Emily, fantastic. That thinking time there. And I'll come back to that because it's a point I'm going to make in a moment. So I love that you've got there as well. Monthly induction for new starters, icebreaker. So what you're doing there really beautifully, Kirsty, is making that human connection that so often we miss out. And we tend to assume that people all have to be very logical and very corporate. We miss that bit out there. And there's so much work on the more human connection there is and the more authenticity to a point that people are comfortable with in a working environment. It makes such a difference to the team dynamic. So I love that you're doing that. Um, and from E Doughty there as well. So similar thing there. So that kind of personal connection going on. These things here will often take less time than it will do to spend several hours making loads of beautiful slides, but will have so much more impact on doing this sort of thing here as well. So I've mentioned this one already. Naming what's happening is something I would really encourage people to do more of if they aren't doing it already. This idea of saying, I'm noticing that in the room this is happening, or it seems that this is happening here as well. It does several things at the same time. It models the fact to the group that we are aware of those people, that we are wanting to understand, and we're hearing them and we are respecting what they are talking about. It normalizes what's happening in the room. It helps people to feel a bit calmer. It can release a lot of tension in that moment when things are challenging here. It doesn't need to be elaborate. A single sentence is normally enough. We're not talking about trying to psychoanalyze every single moment in that group work. Just, this seems like a hard topic. It can be as simple as that with it as well. And it also labels the thing that we are feeling as a group leader. There's lots of research on if we feel nervous or panicked or excited or happy or stressed or whatever it might be in that moment, if we can give that a label, I'm feeling a bit anxious right now. I wouldn't say that to the group, but I'll name it for myself, I'll label it for myself. It allows us to separate the feeling from being something that's taking over us, something that we are experiencing in that moment as well. So labeling both for the group and for what we are going through can work really, really well. Key questions is another one here as well. And again, some people spend hours on trying to make this beautifully crafted, perfect question. It doesn't need to be at all. They're normally very, very simple ones here. And they need to be open enough to invite people to reflect. As Emily said, give people time to do that, but also making sure that they are specific enough to be relevant to what you're talking about in that group. And really simple. Something that I had to work on, I still have to work on sometimes, is not doing super elaborate questions, which are like, think about this, but also think about that, but also think about this bit here and then about that bit there. And people get lost trying to interpret the question. So it can be things like, what is the most challenging moment we've had today as a group? And as simple as that. So keeping questions really simple so the interpretation doesn't take over from the answer here as well. And just having one really useful question before any kind of team workshop or meeting can really help people to be able to be silent and be able to step back and increase their confidence in things like this. And one good question beats 5 mediocre ones. So just thinking about refining question skills, I have a love-hate relationship with AI. I think something it does really badly and something it does really, really well. One thing it can do well is to help you generate great questions. Now, if you ask it to do questions, I would dismiss probably 95% of them. But actually, within that list it might come up with for you, I've got a meeting on this topic here. We've got this context, this group. What could be some really useful questions for it? Just by having a list of like 10 questions, you can quite quickly go, well, I would never ask that. That's rubbish. That's stupid. I'll ignore those. Or maybe that one here, if I reword that one, could be really useful. So using that kind of resource to develop questions and having a bank of them as well that we can draw on can really help people too. And then this is Emily's point from earlier, thinking about giving people thinking time. There's a real discomfort with silence and pauses. The idea here is that so often we think silence is failure, something isn't working. And if we can, again, go back to that kind of storytelling, if we can reinterpret it as thinking rather than failure, that works really well. It's harder in today's session. We've got a limited time. I'm having to kind of almost shorten my own silences in order to get through certain bits here to hopefully add a bit more value to what you're doing. But if I've got a longer session, you'll see me being very, very quiet sometimes. And the point that in my head I'm going, oh, it's a long time now. No one's speaking. It feels uncomfortable, even though I know, and I've seen that over years and years and years, people often need that time. And it's being aware of in a group, when we have people who score more highly on introversion, for example, often there needs to be some thinking and reflection time before answering. Whereas some people who are more extroverted will think by speaking out loud. And by enabling people to have a bit of time, first of all, it brings out not just the loud voices. So going back to those questions earlier, how do we kind of bypass that a little bit? By saying to people, I'm going to ask you a question, I'm going to ask that nobody speaks for the next 30 seconds and actually putting that in. So it forces some thinking time. And the people who think by processing, you can write it down absolutely fine. But what I don't want to have happen straight away is I ask a question and the loudest voice says it straight away because it stops the thinking process for other people there as well. So putting in those little gaps and pauses can work really well because so often the discomfort with silence is ours and not the rest of the groups, but we interpret it quite differently. And if we can be seen as somebody who is able to pause and give silence, the ratings for the confidence level tend to go up quite quickly. Just thinking about what's in the group chat here. Yeah, some lovely ones here about things people want to bring up and asking them directly what they want to have voice. So again, you're doing that is showing respect. And when we talk to people, we did some research recently on people who had been identified by a group leader as disruptive. What they meant was that person kept interrupting, kept pushing back, kept pushing a certain point of view. When we spoke to that person who was doing that, they said, I had to keep doing that because I felt I wasn't being listened to, wasn't being valued with that. What you've done fantastically well there, Stephanie, is derail a lot of that happening earlier on. By helping people to go, I feel I am valued and respected here, it does, and we can measure it really strongly, it will decrease the level of interruptions and pushback in the room because people aren't having to fight their corner quite as much. So it's a lovely way of doing that. I love how people are reading people's comments, echoing that back. So well done to Matt there, echoing Kirsty. So personal experiences into rooms. It's that humanizing of it. And so often we forget the human bit. And in a world where we are going more and more into tech, the human side genuinely makes a really big difference in group work. The last thing I'm going to say to you is signposting. I don't mean this in terms of like mental health signposting to go to your EAP or mental health first aider. I'm talking about in a session, we can signpost into what we're going to go onto next. So telling people where we are. So for example, we're reaching the end of today's session. So we're going to do this sort of final bit here, then start wrapping up. Just kind of helps people think about where we are going. But also it can do something where if people aren't quite sure, feel out of control, they feel more in control and they can relax more in that session. And we can be as simple as we've just done this, we're now moving into Y. So that transition for you, rather than going, right, so we're now going to, yeah, we've done that bit now, we'll do that bit now. Simple as, we've now done X, we'll move into that next. The way you come across like that works really, really well. And if you, like many of us, lose your place in what we're doing, voicing that can also help to remind yourself where we are, where we're going, how much time we have left as well. Now, I'm conscious with all of this that if there's a lot in there that you want to do, it can almost feel overwhelming with stuff like this. So please do not go away and try to implement all of this. My genuine suggestion to you is if there's one little thing that landed for you today, you think maybe I can try that, scrap everything else from today, take that one little thing and just try it out and try it again and again and again, because the difference between that bit there, doing one new thing really well, has such a big impact compared to trying to do 15 things badly and then giving up with them. So one little thing and moving on to that next. If you're happy to share what it might be in the chat box, please feel free to. I'm going to stop sharing slides now and then ask Emily to say anything she wants to, any questions you've got as well, I'll answer her last bit as well.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you everyone for coming along this morning. It's such an interesting topic. And I myself have been through a bit of journey in terms of presenting, in terms of running meetings. And I've taken away so much. So thank you, Tom. And I hope everybody here has taken lots away too to think about and start applying at work. If there's anything further that you'd like to know about some of the training topics that Tom supports our clients with, please just get in touch with myself or any of the team. And if you'd like to set up a no obligation meeting with Tom to talk about in-house training options, we can tailor stuff to any particular projects, meetings, groups that you've got going on coming up. So yeah, please contact me and we can get that arranged for you.